What is going on, guys? We are back with another episode of our Pokemon TCG Pocket, and in today's episode, guys, I want to be actually looking at a tier list for the different supporter cards that are currently in the game. We did do a how to build a team in the previous video, but I think it would be helpful to kind of go in depth on each of the supporter cards and kind of explain things a little bit further. So we have our S tier. This is going to be game-changing cards or cards that are strong enough that in other card games they're typically banned. A is just your very strong cards, useful in almost all situations, or generally better or a tier above, everything else. B is your current meta tier. C is stuff that's a little bit more niche, but the cards are still fairly usable. They're niche either because they only really work with one archetype, or they're a little bit less useful but universal. And then D tier, I think is actually going to be a little bit more just cards that supporter cards that help very specific cards, but are niche and not competitively relevant at the moment. We are currently in a meta with Giratina Arceus. Giratina Arceus and Darkrai are the three big players right now. Gyarados is really big. Charizard's still seeing a lot of use, and fighting types are still seeing a lot of use. So what I want to make sure, and you can get Meowscarada as well, getting in a little bit of Beedrill and a little bit of Exeggutor, but so that's sort of kind of where the meta currently is. Of course, this is the 7th of April, so obviously things can always change, right? You have a couple weeks of tournaments and things will change. I'm kind of looking at it from a ladder perspective as well. I have made my way up to the Ultra Ball rank now, so I'm starting to see, a lot of the less competitive things sort of kind of start to fall off a little bit. So I wanted to kind of just get in depth and talk about each one. Of course, it's my opinion, of course. So if there is a different opinion that you have, make sure to leave it in the comment section down below. Obviously, just because I don't think that a card is particularly good and you do, give your examples, right? Because it does help everyone else that's kind of watching these videos as well. So without further ado, let's just start right at the bottom, actually, and then work our way up the tier. So the first card that I really want to look at is right out the top for me is Blaine. Blaine is a card that we talked about in our kind of how to build a deck video. We used Ninetales as an example. This is a perfect example of a card that is quite useful. 30 attack is actually a pretty substantial boost. It's actually it's higher than Red, it's higher than Giovanni. It does have good use. It's a powerful attack booster. The problem is that Ninetales does 90 and Rapidash does 40, right? And then the only other version of Rapidash is a coin flip to do more, right? So with that being said, it kind of takes the effectiveness of Blaine away. And although Blaine is a good offensive supporter in its own right, unfortunately, it just isn't very good at the moment because Ninetales and Rapidash are very good. If we get new versions where Ninetales does 120 damage and Blaine can boost it to 150, this will be a fantastic card and would move up multiple places on this tier list. But for right now, this is kind of where it lies. Brock is the next one that I see immediately in front of me. Brock is a +1 energy specifically to a Golem or a Onyx. Onyx is a 3 to 4 card energy commitment anyways for a basic to only do 70 damage. Until we see a Steelix card, for example, I can't see Brock being overly great. And then on the Golem side of things, it's 4 energy commitment for 120. 2-stage evolutions are fairly inconsistent right now as it is as a whole. And so having to have a 4th card just to get the energy requirements needed for Golem, you're committing too many resources to a card that isn't impactful enough for the most part. Golem's a good card, right? If you're in a non-EX format, Golem is still perfectly reasonable, and Brock is a card that you might want to play. I wish Brock said the evolutionary lines as well, because that would just make the card be useful for more than just the one card, right? What happens if your opponent knocks out Graveler? Well, now you have a dead Golem in your hand, or a dead Brock in your hand. So I think it's just a little bit too niche. If the card wording was a little bit more vague, it would actually make it a lot better. But as it stands, that's where we currently are. The next one in my mind is Lieutenant Surge. Lieutenant Surge boosts Raichu, Magneton, and Electrode. Is that what it is? But yeah, anyways, regardless of the situation, Lieutenant Surge basically lets you put all of your energy onto your active Pokemon. We saw a little bit of this where you would see Magnemite and Magneton boost a Raichu in Genetic Apex. It's still sort of kind of playable. The problem is that it doesn't work for Pikachu, right? There's a new Pikachu EX card. You can't use it for it. And so really your best targets are a card that discard all your energy afterwards, and that kind of makes it a little bit painful, right? So Lieutenant Surge, unfortunately, you know, is a quick way to get a finishing blow on something, but Raichu and electric types in general just aren't very good, and so unfortunately that kind of makes Lieutenant Surge at the moment not very good. Next on the list of cards that I'm seeing here, I think it's probably Team Galactic Grunt. Team Galactic Grunt, despite the fact that it is a better version of Pokeball for Stunky, and, you know, what's it called? Krogunk. At the moment, neither one of those cards are competitively relevant. You know, there are better ways to poison your opponent. And so at the moment, Team Galactic Grunt just unfortunately just falls flat on its face a little bit, where there's no reason to be playing those cards anyways, and if you are, you're playing a bad deck at the moment, unfortunately. Weezing is just a better version of Poison. Grafaiai is a better version of Poison. Paldean Wooper into Clodsire is a better version of Poison. You know, Toxicroak, the one energy that does do the toxic damage, is okay, but again, it's a one-stage evolution for a toxic that you could do with other things, and you don't need to search them the same way. So at the moment, just Team Galactic Grunt, just unfortunately, it's the Pokemon they're supporting aren't good enough. The next one on my list, and this one pains me a little bit, is Cynthia. Cynthia, in the same conversation as, you know, Blaine. Unfortunately, this only boosts Togekiss specifically, or it only boosts Garchomp specifically, and this doesn't include Garchomp EX. So the first problem that you have is Togekiss is a two-stage evolution. Same thing with Garchomp. It makes them very inconsistent cards on their own. Togekiss is probably the better target of the two. You can get up to 170 damage. It actually makes Cynthia the best attacking supporter there is. If Togekiss or Garchomp ever became competitively relevant, this card would jump up right away to a B tier card. But at the moment, neither one of those cards are totally used right now. Togekiss got absolutely hammered when Dialga Arceus became a real common threat. And then unfortunately for this particular meta, the non-EX Garchomp card is just not great. It's a two separate energy commitments in water and fighting, and water individually is very, very good. But the best partners for it would be another, you know, multicolored water Pokemon. And the best one's Greninja, which is another two-stage evolution, and so you have two stages, which brings you to 12. You run out of spaces to be able to put Cynthia in your deck and have it be effective. So that's sort of kind of the problem with Cynthia. Although individually in a vacuum, she is extremely powerful. And I will give the devs credit for that, you know, the developers of this game. All of these cards are actually quite good. They just need to have the Pokemon they're supporting be a little bit stronger and more worth it. Cynthia getting Garchomp up to 150, while it is good, 100 is not great outside of that for a two-stage evolution. It's the problem with Gengar at the moment too, right? So, moving on, I actually put Volkner down here. I know that some people probably put Volkner a little bit higher. The thing for Volkner with me is that Luxray does 120 damage. You won't be able to put the energy... Like, you'll be able to attack once with Luxray for 3 energy, do your 120 to anything you want. It loses all of the energy. The next turn, you put your 1 energy for your turn, plus you Volkner to get the 2 energy from your discard pile. The problem with this is that you are always going to be -1 energy from where you started. And when you use 2 of these, you're -2. Now, you might get 3 shots off at 120, but the current meta attacks and has HP stats of 160. So you're running into a lot of problems where you're just not doing enough damage with Luxray. Electivire is a little bit different, where it's 2 energy, but if you put the 2 extra energy on, you do 120. You're not losing the energy after Volkner, which makes it a little bit more efficient. The biggest problem with that is that you have to already have 2 energy in your discard pile. So, you know, something had to either get knocked out, or you had to switch something out, which means you were in a disadvantaged position to begin with. So it's sort of kind of one of those things where it gives you some energy back, but it's still a little bit of a loss for me on that. The last one that I want to put here is, I think on this particular list, in the D tier anyways, is probably Celestic Town Elder. Celestic Town Elder unfortunately has the problem of that she randomly targets a basic in your discard pile rather than in your deck. And this is going to be a good card, I think, at some point when you get more cards that mill, whether it be from your opponent's end of things or whether you just have decks that you want to mill as your own. But the biggest problem right now is that it's still a random target. You can do it, but there aren't enough great basic Pokemon that you only want to play one of, have it okay being knocked out, and then sit there with the Celestic Town Elder. You only have 3 points in a game. You have to play this in a non-EX deck. Maybe you play it in an Arceus deck where you play the non-EX Arceus and play 1 copy of it, so if it gets destroyed, you can still have the effects of those link cards. But this card was designed for Arceus, and I just think that it fell a little bit flat. But I think someday it could be better. But for right now, it's just not competitively relevant. No one really uses it in their decks at all. And it's tough to place any higher than where it is currently. Moving on to the C tier. The first one that I want to talk about is Koga. Koga is actually a pretty interesting card in its own right. The ability to fully retreat a Pokemon back to your hand also means that you remove all the damage that's on it as well. This makes Koga pretty effective with Weezing, and Weezing is a 1 energy attacker. You can play the basic right away from your hand again, and then the next turn have your Weezing back fully healthy with the 1 energy on it, so it actually is pretty efficient. The only problem is that it makes Weezing feel like a bit like a 2-stage evolution card in a deck, and so you have to have the space for it. But other than that, I think it's actually fairly good. For as far as the targeted cards go, nothing can heal you 100 damage like the way that Koga can heal you 100 damage, which is pretty effective. Like, none of these other ones do the same level of healing or damage destruction, right? Cynthia does 50, Koga can potentially heal you 100. It's just night and day, the difference that you get from it. The next one that I think is in this very similar vein is Budding Expeditioner. No one's really playing this card. Mew is used occasionally in the Arceus Dialga deck, but really isn't seeing a ton of play outside of that. It's an okay card. Again, it's very similar to Koga. It actually is a little bit better because it's basic, but the problem is that because Mew's an EX card, there's more risk in it getting knocked out, and so you're not really okay letting it get to 10 HP and then having Budding Expedition in your hand. You're going to protect it well before then, and I think that's sort of kind of what ruins Budding Expedition in comparison to Koga, right? You're not giving up 2 points if something does go wrong. So that's sort of kind of the reasoning for that. Again, Mew is very strong as well. You can attack for 1 psychic energy, but if you're playing it in the other decks, 3 energy is a lot higher punishment for putting it back in your hand, and so there's kind of that trade-off, which does make me believe that Koga is a little bit stronger Just going in order though, the next card that I believe is in the C tier is blue. Blue has implications where it can save you 10 damage. Really the only decks that can afford to play this card that aren't, you know, focused on anything are like the 18 trainer decks I've noticed, or like the 17 trainer decks. Some people have run blue to just kind of change the math a little bit. You can cancel out a Giovanni, which is nice. You do have to be proactive about it though, and so you sort of kind of have to predict what your opponent's hand is a little bit, which makes this card a little bit inconsistent. I find that the cards that are more reactive to your opponents are a little bit weaker than the cards that you initiate something with the card. And so blue unfortunately falls a little bit short in that regard. If it healed 20, I think it'd be a little bit more fair, but only healing 10, unfortunately it falls. It's a card that not everyone can... It's a decent enough card, but not every card can afford to run it when you can only play one supporter per turn, and there's still all the things up here that just are so much more relevant to every deck that you're going to be using. The next card that I have is Berry. Berry, I think, is good situationally. The ability to remove 20 energy, or 20 energy. Their ability to remove 2 energy cost from your Pokemon is very, very strong. We've seen Snorlax is a fairly bulky Pokemon, 140 HP. That can attack for 2 energy is extremely good, and attack for 100 at that, which makes Berry very, very good. It is a little bit difficult to find Berry and Snorlax, have them combined super early. You're typically, you know, trying to play Professor's Research and other cards first to find your Berry, and then Berry's useful. In that time, it gives you 2 turns to try to get that energy onto your Snorlax or your Staraptor. Staraptor I find is a little bit weaker because it is 2-stage evolution, needing another supporter, but and you should be able to get that 3 energy without Berry. But for Snorlax, it is quite good. For Heracross's biggest problem is just the energy commitment for a coin flip. Snorlax is definitely the best target. But yeah, the 2 energy cost, it's great early game, but if you find your berries early game, this card is a dead card at the end of the game, and that is a problem, where like blue is technically usable at any point of the game, right? So that's sort of kind of why it's C tier. It's situationally good, but it's not like a staple meta card, and there is situations where it's not great. The last card for this tier, I think everything else I kind of like a little bit more, but Adaman is the next card here. Very similar to blue. It only works for steel types, but it takes away more damage from your steel types, which is pretty nice in Dialga decks, and like Skarmory Bastion decks and things like that. But overall, I would rather be putting pressure on or healing rather than just preventing 30 damage. But yeah, I mean, it's situationally okay, but you have to be running it in heal. It is better than blue if I was like putting them in order, but it's also only good in one deck, and that sort of kind of makes it a little bit more neat. Moving on to the B tier. These are cards that are now going to be at least relevant in any deck. I don't think anyone's going to question you on putting any of these cards in any of your decks, even if it's not optimal. People will at least give you the benefit of the doubt that, yeah, this is a decent card, like I could see why you put it in here. The first one is Giovanni. Just 10 extra damage is actually really impactful. When you're playing with the top tier cards, they're all dealing enough damage that 10 damage is relevant. It does pick up knockouts in places. You're actually seeing some decks that are running 1 Giovanni and 1 red, because red only works on EX cards, and so Giovanni gives you that boost. You still pick up knockouts on specific things. Anything dealing 130 appreciates Giovanni because you can now knock out an Arceus in 1 hit. Anything that's dealing 120 still appreciates Giovanni as well to knock out Mews and other things like that. So there are very relevant damage points on this. And so Giovanni is still a fairly good card that no one's really going to question you playing the card. They might just question why you're playing one card over the other, but still, it's still decent. And yeah. The next card that I want to talk about, and I am trying to do this in sort of kind of in the numerical order of the card, is Erica. The ability to heal 50 damage off of grass types is very, very strong. They already have strong support in Shaman. We now have a new Wigglytuff that also is able to be thrown into a grass deck, and now you're healing your grass type Pokemon for 70 damage per turn potentially. You can still play this with potions, which puts it up to 90 or 110 healing per turn. That's an insane amount of healing and very, very strong. If grass types stop being relevant in the meta, this card obviously drops down to the C tier, but it is a very strong card regardless, and every grass type is probably going to just want to have Erica over a potion in their deck. And you're willing to give up your one supporter card for the turn to get that much healing. So I think it's a very, very good card. The next one is Leaf. Leaf's ability to be able to make a retreat cost of 2/0 is very potent. Early game, it fixes a lot of leads. It's very, very good when you're playing with two. Most of the good cards have 1 or 2 retreat costs. Leaf is able to sort of kind of, regardless of whether it's a 1 or 2, you're able to play this card and switch it out. So it fixes leads for you. Moltres is a notable example. Dialga, Arceus, Darkrai, Giratina, all of them are pretty relevant. People still even use it for Charizard, but again, early game, you're trying to just fix your lead. Leaf guarantees you to fix your lead almost. So I like this card. X-Speed is a card that does compete with this card quite a bit. If you decide to have alternatives to Leaf, you could play a Dawn and an X-Speed. It technically achieves the same result, although you're using 2 cards instead of 1. But Dawn gives you the versatility of being offensive later on as well, where Leaf is strictly for switching. 2 X-Speeds also accomplish the same thing, but it's twice the amount of card commitment. So there are trade-offs, right? You need to decide what your deck needs. Some decks don't need Leaf at all, but nobody's going to really question if you're playing Leaf, which is kind of the main thing. Speaking of the next card, we're going to talk about Dawn. Dawn has the ability to move 1 energy from your bench to your active slot. We see this all the time, that this is super relevant. You get a Moltres, you get a Manaphy that puts 2 energy up, you switch out, and then you're able to Dawn the energy back to the active Pokemon, and now you've given them an extra energy that turn. This turns Pokemon with 3 energy commitments into 2 energy commitments, and sometimes allows them to attack in your second turn, which is very, very good when you're going second. It changes Moltres. In the fire type game for Charizard and Moltres, it completely changed Moltres from just being this utility Pokemon to actually being a secondary attacker for you. It's actually relevant in Darkrai Giratina. It's relevant in Giratina Mewtwo. It's relevant everywhere, right? Even in any Arceus deck, it's relevant. You can set things up faster than your opponent can expect it. It's a surprise attack. And I think that's where you really get the value out of Dawn. It's the same thing as Giovanni, where I talked about Blue and Adamant in the C tier, where it's like you play it, your opponent now knows they can't do as much damage. This surprise factor is really what makes these cards very, very good. The next card I want to talk about is Mars. Mars is a card that is very interesting. I think some people play Mars a little bit wrong. Mars, in my opinion, is best used when you're winning the game, you're trying to guarantee a W, and what you want to do is go, okay, you have 1 prize left or 2 prizes left. A lot of people are storing the cards in their hand because a lot of people are playing Iono. And so what you can really do is you can knock your opponent down from like 6-7 cards to 1 or 2 left, and then go, you know what, if you don't redraw the 1 card you need, I'm gonna win next turn. And that's sort of kind of what Mars is best used for, especially in decks that's playing 2 EX cards, because you get that 2 prizer right away, and then you can sort of kind of you can really make sure that Mars is able to kind of just neutralize your opponent's hand. Now they only have 1 card. They're not going to be able to Cyrus you, they're not going to be able to Sabrina you and change their game plan. So sometimes it can be really, really effective. You do have to be situational with it, though. You're really looking for card advantage, right? Because you're giving up 1 card in your hand you need to be taking away at least 2 cards from your opponent for it to be worth it. But if you can do that, Mars is a very strong card. It's way stronger than red card is, in my opinion. Because red card always gives you back 3, I believe, where Mars just takes a card out of your hand, right? So, or more. So, it's kind of a late game disruption, or it can be like a early game disruption if you really need it. If your opponent has been like, if your opponent's already like used 2 Pokeballs and then also Professor's Research twice, it's also pretty safe that you could play Mars then, and at least you're giving yourself a chance, right? The next card that I want to talk about is Iono, though. Iono is a card that basically reshuffles your entire hand and your opponent's. Basically, this is best used in 2 Sage Evolution decks. You're trying to, when your whole game plan is around 1 card, you need to be able to get that card as consistently as possible. And Iono is just a 3rd card that lets you redraw cards, that lets you do that besides Professor's Research. And in the off chance it disrupts your opponent. So, but overall, it's a pretty relevant card in any Fossil deck, in any 2 Sage Evolution deck. It's pretty relevant. And so I think it's just overall a pretty good card. It's not the top of the list though. Like, you can not play this and be fine. But it is pretty good. Mars, at the moment, you're seeing a lot of top end players playing. But they're playing it in the right situations. When you're in the lower tiers on the ladder, Mars is not really a relevant card. The next card that I want to talk about is Pokemon Center Lady. Pokemon Center Lady is very, very awesome. She has the ability to heal you for 30, which is a little bit more than a potion, but also the added effect of being able to clear any status condition. This really slows down Miss Magius decks, not that they're really super relevant. You're stopping poison from Clodsire, which actually is somewhat relevant, and sleep, which is really, really good. There's not a ton of that kicking around the top tiers of things, but the ability to heal a status, heal a confusion, you know, is all relevant and all very good. And right now, it's not as big of a deal, but it is actually a fairly big deal. As we get away from Arceus being the best card in the game, people are going to try to start using statuses again, and I think Pokemon Center Lady is going to really help. And then the last card for this particular tier for me is probably Team Rocket Grunt. Team Rocket Grunt is, you know, everyone kind of labeled it as the counter Misty card. But the problem is that Misty, you get to flip those coins. If you get the heads, you get the effect of it right away and can attack right away, right? So it doesn't really counter Misty as well. I find what it's better for is saving you from losing is really what it does, right? Your opponent has something in their active slot, you're trying to disrupt them from being able to retreat, you're trying to be able to disrupt them from being able to attack you next turn. Team Rocket Grunt is really good in those particular situations, right? A lead Giratina that got energy on the first turn, even though they couldn't attach energy. You go through your turn, you probably wait because you're not just looking for a coin flip for a one of, you're looking to kind of get more value out of it. If you get the 12% or better chance at 2 energy drops. And so now you wait for that Giratina to have 3 energy, and now you take away the energy. That's the better situation to be doing it in, or late game when you're trying to stop your opponent from kind of sweeping you. That's when I find Team Rocket Grunt is at its best. Can be very, very good. I think it's a good one of in a lot of decks. You know, the Beedrill decks are running 2 of them for the most part, but I think a lot of decks benefit from having 1. But it is a deck that you have to sort of kind of find room to fit. It's not always a card that's needed to be in your deck, and so that's why it's B tier for me. It's competitively relevant, but I don't think every deck needs to be running. So that's kind of the B tier. Moving on to the A tier, these are the cards that are generally going to be impactful every time you see them in your hand. There's no exceptions. They are always the best cards to be playing when you're playing them. You can see with the B tier here, like, they are good, but they're situational as to when you want to be playing them. Sometimes you're holding on to those B tier cards for like half a game. In some situations where A tier, you know, the moment you have it, you have a threat in your hand. And so for me, starting off is Sabrina. Sabrina is a great defensive option to force your opponent to switch out. Early game, it really disrupts your opponents. Say that they have a Moltres and a Charmander, you know, you can force them into the Charmander lead. Now they have to kind of scramble to switch back into Moltres. You get a Giratina that's fully set up and something else that's not really ready on the bench. You can maybe target that Pokemon that can't retreat. You can kind of get a little bit of beach whale situations, right? You can early game with a lot of Druddigons running around. People are starting to run double Sabrina. You force the Druddigon out and target the thing that's behind it that they're trying to kind of slow play. This really works well against Magikarp and Gyarados. This really worked well against Darkrai and Dialga that were playing. Darkrai and Giratina that were playing Druddigon. We've actually seen in the last week, people have actually stopped playing Druddigon because people have been doubling up playing Sabrina. So Sabrina always has been good. It's been good since the very beginning. And so for me, it's always a card that's at least a threat. If you're not playing Sabrina, you're playing Cyrus. Almost every deck is playing one of the two, and all of them are impactful. And Sabrina, anyways, is impactful in every single moment of the game. So, moving on right away, the next card that's right here is Cyrus. You know, immediately you talk about Sabrina. Any Pokemon that has damage onto it, you can now Cyrus. You know, you're seeing whole strategies around people playing Hitmonlee. Electabuzz became popular, Rotom became popular. With the high damage, there's more switching around, and so you're actually seeing Cyrus is very, very effective. The fact that you can choose what you're pulling into the front, you know, having a little bit more control of the situation is always good. I showed you guys when we were doing a live stream. I played double Sabrina and double Cyrus with a Rocky Helmet Weavile deck. You know, the decks that are playing Druddigon are all knowing they're getting 20 damage off on things, so Cyrus is super competitively relevant and always a threat. Everyone always has to be playing around Cyrus late game as well. It completely changes your win conditions in certain situations, and so yeah, it's just a very, very threatening card. The next one is Irida. Irida is one of the best healing cards in the entire game as long as you were playing water decks or water energy. Irida not only heals 40 damage off of your active Pokemon, or whatever Pokemon you choose, it heals 40 damage off of every single Pokemon that has water energy attached to it, whether it be on the bench, the active slot, whatever. And so in theory, Irida has the ability to heal, you know, 160 damage, which is just way, way more than any other card that you have. Any card that's playing water appreciates it. Normal types have almost exclusively been running water energy because of Irida. And so it's starting to impact other things as well. And this is kind of what I was talking about with Cynthia, right? You already need to be playing a Sabrina and a Cyrus probably. We're going to talk about Professor's research here in a minute. And so they're playing two of those, and then you want to be playing Irida because that's your best healing card, and you're playing double energy, so you want water, so it's very, very good. You probably want Leaf, probably want Giovanni or other cards like that. You just don't end up having the room, and that's sort of kind of re-justifying Cynthia's placement down there. But Irida is just so good, right? That ridiculous amount of healing. When you play this in the right situation, you can completely change your opponent's entire game plan, which is very, very strong. You get two of those. You can still play potions with it. Again, we're starting to see Shaman's been played in decks that aren't water decks either for 10 extra healing. This one's impactful enough where it heals you enough that it's really, really good, right? On paper, it's a little bit less than Erica, but in reality, it does so much more than Erica that it's just crazy. And the last one is Red. Red is an extremely good card. The ability to deal 20 extra damage to EX Pokemon is completely changing the game. The meta right now is completely revolved around basic EX Pokemon, and so Red is coming in and allowing a lot of Pokemon to be very successful, right? You're seeing Masquerada, you're seeing a lot of that, you know, you do 130, Red gets you up to 150, very, very potent. Anything that deals 130 naturally is able to one-shot Giratina. 160 is kind of becoming the new threshold, so anything that hits 140 is now also knocking things out. It's just very, very useful. It's very, very good. The only problem is that it's situational on an EX Pokemon, and so there are decks where it isn't relevant at all. But in the games that it is relevant, it's extremely impactful. The fact that it's usable with anything and it's not specific to a specific one card is the reason and the separation between, Blaine and Cynthia over Red and Giovanni. And then the last two cards, obviously you see them at the bottom of the list here. It is Misty and Professor's Research. Misty is the only supporter card in the entire game that gives you the option to attach energy first turn if you're playing water deck. The other added effect is that you can potentially get more than one. If you get no heads whatsoever, the only thing you lost is the ability to play another supporter card, but the benefit is that you potentially get 1 to an unlimited amount of energy almost, depending on how lucky you are with coin flips. This can make Pokemon that take 4 turns to set up take 1 or 2. This can make Pokemon that, you normally wouldn't get damage on the first turn, and now you're attacking for a decent amount. This is why 18 Trainer Articuno and Palkia are really the main ones that you see when you see 18 trainers. And Giratina is the other exception to that, where it guarantees you 1 energy. But this is a card that effectively allows water types to be uniquely powerful over other types, and this is sort of kind of what keeps Gyarados so competitively relevant. When you look at the top of this tier list, Misty and Irida, both being water type supporter cards, just give water type such an advantage over everything. And so I think realistically, and when you're playing water decks, you almost always see 2 Misty and 2 Irida. It's almost a foregone conclusion. Like, they are willing to play 8 to 10 supporter cards just to put those in, because they're so better than any other item they're going to put in their deck. And the last card, of course, is Professor's Research. Professor's Research is effectively Pot of Greed of Pokemon Pocket. The ability to draw the top 2 cards of your deck for the cost of 1. It thins your deck and draws you an extra card from what you already had. It gives you +1 card advantage. It thins your deck out by 2. You have 2 of them in every deck. There isn't going to be a deck around that isn't playing them. You do see weird decks that sometimes don't play 2 Pokeballs. You will never see a deck that doesn't play 2 Professor's Research. Now, the fact that you can only play 1 supporter card per turn, this +1 is always a benefit to you in every situation. You can potentially... All of these other cards, generally speaking, if you have Professor's Research in hand, unless you need it to save yourself the game, you're playing Professor's Research. And so, to me, this is just a very consistent card that is very, very strong. And that's sort of kind of my tier list here. Let me zoom out a little bit just so that you guys can see it a little bit more in full here. So that is the tier list for today. Oh, this is a little bit too low now. My bad. It's a little bit too low. Trying to be, helpful. But yeah, so that's the tier list today. If there's anything you would change on this tier list, let me know in the comment section down below. Is there anything that you think that I missed, kind of thought about, or something that you would change around? Again, I didn't put these in order in the tiers themselves. They're actually in card order, actually. And by the set they were released. So there is some kind of debate between the tier of which is better. I think people are going to value healing over, some people value healing, some people value damage, some people value other things. So within the tier, it's subjective, but I think overall this is a fairly cohesive list. I don't think that I've tiered anything dramatically different that isn't a similar card, like Giovanni and Red, for example. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys